Story. The blood on her hands wouldn't wash away no matter how hard she scrubbed in the creek outside Tombstone, Arizona, and Ella Morrison knew that some stains went deeper than skin. The year was 1882, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly as she crouched by the water, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her pale face. She had been running for 3 weeks now, ever since she escaped from the clutches of the Dalton gang, and every shadow made her flinch. Every hoofbeat in the distance made her heart race with terror. The things they had forced her to do, the people she had helped them rob, the lies she had told to innocent families so the gang could gain entry to their homes. It all weighed on her soul like stones tied around her neck, pulling her down into darkness. Backslash, and she heard the horse before she saw the rider, and instinctively she scrambled backward, her wet hands reaching for the small pistol she had stolen from one of the gang members during her escape. Her fingers trembled as she pointed it toward the approaching figure, though she wasn't entirely sure she could pull the trigger even if her life depended on it. The rider came into view slowly, deliberately, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of summer sky. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty denim and a worn leather vest, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the relentless Arizona sun. Backslash, easy there, Miss Backslash, he said, his voice low and calm, the kind of voice that gentled horses and soothed frightened creatures. Backslash, I'm not here to hurt you. Name's Jesse Hartwell. I work at the Triple Creek Ranch about 5 miles east of here. Backslash, and Ella kept the gun trained on him, though her arms ached from holding it steady. Backslash, stay back, backslash, she warned, hating how her voice shook. Backslash, I'll shoot if I have to. Backslash, and Jesse remained perfectly still on his horse, a beautiful chestnut mare that stood as calm as her rider. Backslash, I believe you would, backslash, he said, and there was no mockery in his tone, only respect. Backslash, but I'm hoping you won't need to. I saw you from the ridge, been watching for a few minutes to make sure you weren't in some kind of trouble. You look like you could use some help, maybe a hot meal and a safe place to rest. Backslash, I don't need anything from you. Backslash, Ella said, but even as the words left her mouth, her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. She hadn't eaten properly in days, surviving on what she could forage and the meager supplies she had managed to take when she fled. The gun wavered slightly in her grip. Backslash, and Jesse's eyes, kind and patient, never left her face. Backslash, when's the last time you ate something, miss? Real food, I mean, not just berries and creek water. Backslash, and Ella's resolve crumbled a little. She was so tired, so hungry, so desperately alone. But trusting anyone felt impossible now, not after what she had been through, not after what she had been forced to become. Backslash, how do I know you're not one of them? Backslash, she asked. Backslash, how do I know this isn't some trick? Backslash, and you don't. Backslash, Jesse admitted, and his honesty surprised her. Backslash, all I can give you is my word, and I know that might not mean much to a stranger. But I'm not riding away and leaving you out here alone, not when you're clearly in trouble. So you've got 2 choices. You can come with me to the ranch, where my boss and his wife will feed you and give you a place to clean up. Or I can sit right here on this horse until you decide you trust me enough to let me help. Backslash, and something in his steady gaze, in the quiet confidence of his words, made Ella want to believe him. She had become good at reading people during her time with the Daltons. It had been necessary for survival, and everything about this cowboy suggested honesty. Slowly, painfully slowly, she lowered the gun. Backslash, if you try anything, backslash, she said, her voice still hard despite her exhaustion, backslash, I will shoot you. Backslash, and a small smile crossed Jesse's weathered face. Backslash, fair enough. Now, why don't you let me help you up onto my horse? You look about ready to collapse, and it's a long walk to the ranch. And Ella hesitated, then nodded. She tucked the gun into the waistband of her torn skirt and allowed Jesse to dismount and approach her. His movements were careful, telegraphed, giving her plenty of time to bolt if she wanted to. When he reached out his hand to help her stand, his palm was calloused and warm, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. He helped her onto the horse with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance even though the saddle wasn't made for two. And the ride to the Triple Creek Ranch took about an hour, and Ella spent most of it fighting to stay conscious. The rhythmic movement of the horse, the warmth of the sun, and the sheer exhaustion that had been building for weeks all combined to make her eyelids impossibly heavy. Several times she felt herself starting to slip, and each time Jesse's arm would steady her, his voice quiet in her ear telling her to hold on just a little longer. And when they finally arrived at the ranch, Ella was struck by how peaceful it looked. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and flowering vines climbing up the posts. There were several outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the scrubland. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron, her face creased with concern. Jesse, what on earth ? The woman called out. She was middle-aged, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held both warmth and no-nonsense authority. Found her by Eagle Creek. Mrs. Patterson, Jesse said as he carefully helped Ella down from the horse. She's in a bad way, needs food and rest. Maybe some answers too, but that can wait. And Mrs. Patterson's expression softened as she took in Ella's disheveled appearance, the hollows under her eyes, the way she swayed on her feet. Oh, you poor dear. Come inside right now. Jesse, you stable Luna and then come in for supper. I'll get this young lady sorted out. And Ella wanted to protest, wanted to maintain her guard, but the kindness in Mrs. Patterson's voice dissolved the last of her resistance. She allowed herself to be led inside, into a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and stewing meat. The older woman settled her into a chair at a large wooden table and immediately set about preparing a plate of food. Now, you eat slowly. Mrs. Patterson instructed as she placed the plate in front of Ella. Your stomach's probably not used to much, and I don't want you getting sick. While you eat, I'll heat some water for a bath. You look like you could use one if you don't mind me saying. And Ella stared at the food, tears suddenly streaming down her face. It had been so long since anyone had shown her simple kindness, had treated her like a human being rather than a tool or a possession. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you so much. And Mrs. Patterson patted her shoulder gently. No need for tears, dear. We help folks when they need it, that's just how we do things out here. You're safe now, whatever it is you're running from, but was she safe? Ella wondered as she forced herself to eat slowly, savoring each bite even as her mind raced. The Daltons wouldn't give up looking for her. She knew too much about their operations, had been forced to participate in too many of their crimes. Marcus Dalton, the gang's leader, had made it clear what would happen if she ever tried to leave. She had seen him kill men for less than betrayal. And the memory of Marcus made her hands shake so badly she had to set down her fork. She had been barely 18 when he and his gang had attacked the wagon her family was traveling in, heading west to start a new life in California. They had killed her father and brother without hesitation, and her mother had died from her injuries 3 days later. Ella had been kept alive for other purposes. Marcus had said she had a useful face, innocent and trustworthy, perfect for the kind of work they needed done. /N for 2 years. She had been forced to pose as everything from a wealthy widow to a minister's daughter, gaining the trust of their targets while the gang planned their attacks. She had watched people die, had been unable to warn them, had been complicit in horrors that made her sick to remember. And when she wasn't being useful, when she was back at their hideout in the mountains, Marcus made sure she understood that she was his property, that she would never be free. /N the memory of his hands on her, the bruises he left, the threats he whispered, made bile rise in her throat. She pushed the plate away, suddenly unable to eat another bite, /N misses. Patterson appeared at her elbow, her expression knowing. /The bath's ready, dear, come on, let's get you cleaned up. Sometimes washing away the trail dust helps clear the mind too. /N the bath was in a small room off the kitchen, and the hot water felt like heaven on Ella's sore muscles. Mrs. Patterson provided her with soap that smelled of lavender and a clean nightgown to wear afterward. As Ella scrubbed away weeks of grime and fear, she tried to figure out what to do next. She couldn't stay here, couldn't put these kind people in danger. But she had nowhere else to go, no money, no family, no friends. She was utterly alone in the world. /N when she emerged from the bath, clean and dressed in the borrowed nightgown. She found Jessie and Mrs. Patterson sitting at the kitchen table with an older man who had to be Mr. Patterson. They looked up as she entered, and Ella instinctively froze, her hand moving toward where her gun had been before she remembered she had left it with her clothes. /N easy, Jessie said, rising from his chair. This is Tom Patterson, the owner of the ranch. We've been talking, and we all agree you're welcome to stay here as long as you need to. No questions asked, no obligations. We've got a spare room in the bunkhouse where some of the seasonal workers stay. It's empty right now, and it's yours if you want it. /N Ella stared at them, at their open, honest faces, and felt something crack inside her chest. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not some innocent girl who got lost on the trail. I've done terrible things. People are looking for me, dangerous people, and if they find me here, they'll kill you all without thinking twice. And Tom Patterson leaned back in his chair, his weathered face thoughtful. We've dealt with dangerous people before, miss. This is Arizona territory. In 1882, danger comes with living here. But nobody deserves to be hunted, and nobody should face their troubles alone. Whatever you've done, whatever you're running from, you can tell us when you're ready. Until then, the offer stands. N Jessie stepped closer, and Ella noticed for the first time how tall he was, how the lamplight caught the gold in his brown hair. You're exhausted, he said gently. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. Just rest and we'll talk more in the morning. I give you my word, nobody's going to hurt you here. And Ella wanted to argue, wanted to explain that his word couldn't protect her from Marcus Dalton and his gang, but she was too tired to fight anymore. She nodded mutely and allowed Mrs. Patterson to lead her to the bunkhouse, to a small but clean room with a real bed and curtains on the window. The moment her head hit the pillow, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first real rest she had known in months. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was and panic seized her. Then the memories of the previous day flooded back, and she sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. Someone had left clothes for her on a chair by the door, simple work clothes that looked about her size. There was also a basin of fresh water and a small mirror. And Ella dressed quickly, braiding her long dark hair to keep it out of her face. The reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, a thin, haunted-looking young woman with shadows under her green eyes and a wariness that seemed etched into every line of her face. She was 20 years old, but she looked older, aged by experiences no one should have to endure. And when she stepped outside, she found the ranch already alive with activity. Cowboys were moving horses between corrals. Someone was hammering in one of the outbuildings, and the smell of breakfast drifted from the main house. She spotted Jesse near one of the corrals, working with a young horse on a lead rope. He looked up as she approached, and his face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features into something almost boyish. Morning, he called out. You look better. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months, Ella admitted, then immediately felt awkward, unsure how to interact with someone who wasn't threatening her or demanding something from her. Thank you for everything. I should probably be moving on today, though. I don't want to impose. And Jesse handed the lead rope to a younger cowboy who had been watching the training session and walked over to her. Where would you go, he asked, not unkindly. And before you answer, you should know that Mrs. Patterson's got breakfast ready and she'll have my hide if I let you leave without eating. So at least stay for that. And Ella's stomach answered for her, growling loudly enough that both she and Jesse laughed. It felt strange to laugh, foreign and a little frightening, but also wonderful. All right, she agreed. Breakfast and then I really should go. And breakfast was a lively affair, with half a dozen ranch hands crowded around the big kitchen table, joking and eating massive quantities of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. Ella sat between Jesse and Mrs. Patterson, feeling overwhelmed by all the noise and activity, but also strangely comforted by it. These people were so normal, so unburdened by the darkness that had consumed her life for the past 2 years. And after breakfast, Jesse asked if she wanted to walk with him while he checked on some fencing in the northern pasture. Ella agreed, partly because she didn't know how to politely refuse and partly because something about Jesse's presence made her feel calmer than she had in a long time. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following a dirt path that wound through the scrubland dotted with mesquite and sagebrush. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, Jesse said eventually. But if you need to talk, I'm a good listener. And I don't judge. I've made my share of mistakes. And Ella glanced at him, at his honest, open face, and felt the weight of her secrets pressing against her chest. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the guilt and shame that had been eating away at her. But another part of her, the part that had learned to survive by trusting no one, warned her to stay silent. They reached a section of fence that needed repair, and Jesse pulled tools from the pack he had brought. Ella watched him work for a few minutes, then found herself saying, the Dalton gang. That's who I'm running from. Marcus Dalton and his men, and Jesse's hands stilled on the fence post. His jaw tightened, and she saw him processing what she had said. The Dalton gang was infamous throughout the territory, known for their brutality, and for always staying one step ahead of the law. How did you get mixed up with them? He asked carefully. And so Ella told him, slowly at first and then in a rush, about the attack on her family's wagon, about being taken captive, about the 2 years of being forced to help them rob and con innocent people. She told him about Marcus's cruelty, about the things he had done to her, about how she had finally managed to escape when they were camped near the Mexican border, and Marcus had gotten drunk enough to pass out. By the time she finished, she was crying, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. She expected Jesse to recoil from her, to look at her with disgust or pity or worst of all, suspicion that she had been complicit in the gang's crimes. Instead, he set down his tools and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried against his chest. // listen to me. / he said when her sobs finally subsided. / whatever you were forced to do, whatever happened to you, it doesn't define who you are. You survived. You got away. That took more courage than most people will ever have to show in their entire lives. / but I helped them. / Ella choked out. / people died because I lied to them, because I made them trust me so the gang could rob them. I'm not innocent, Jesse. I'm not some victim you can rescue and make whole again. / and Jesse pulled back enough to look into her eyes, his hands gently framing her face. / you were a prisoner, / he said firmly. / you did what you had to do to stay alive. That's not the same as choosing to hurt people. And as for being whole, nobody's asking you to be perfect. We're all broken in our own ways, Ella. The question is what we do with those broken pieces. Do we let them define us, or do we pick them up and build something new? / and his words hit her like a physical blow. Not because they were harsh, but because they offered a possibility she hadn't dared to consider. What if she could build something new? What if her past didn't have to be a life sentence? / I don't know if I can / she whispered. / I don't know if I know how to be anything other than afraid anymore. / then we'll figure it out together. / Jesse said. And the simple certainty in his voice made something warm bloom in Ella's chest, something she was afraid to name, but that felt suspiciously like hope. / and over the following weeks, Ella gradually began to settle into life at the Triple Creek Ranch. The Pattersons made good on their promise to let her stay without obligation, but Ella couldn't stand being idle. She started helping Mrs. Patterson with the cooking and cleaning, then began working in the vegetable garden that supplied much of the ranch's food. The physical work felt good, honest and clean in a way that helped quiet some of the demons in her head. / and Jesse made a point of checking on her every day, often inviting her to ride with him when he went out to tend to various ranch tasks. Ella had been a decent rider before the attack on her family, and the skill came back to her quickly. She loved being out on the range, loved the vast open spaces and the endless sky, so different from the cramped, tense confines of the gang's hideout. / and one evening, about a month after her arrival, Jesse invited her to watch the sunset from a ridge overlooking the ranch. They sat side by side on a flat rock, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink and purple as the sun sank toward the horizon. / when you look at all that space, all that possibility, what do you see? / and Ella considered the question seriously. A month ago, she would have seen only danger, places for enemies to hide, routes of escape. But now, after weeks of safety and kindness, she saw something different. / I see freedom, / she said softly. / I see a place where maybe someday I could build a life that's mine. Not controlled by fear or by someone else's cruelty, just mine. / and Jesse nodded, and when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. / you know, when I first saw you by that creek, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And I know that probably sounds crazy, considering you were covered in trail dust and pointing a gun at me, but it's true. And these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness despite everything you've been through, well, you've only gotten more beautiful in my eyes. / and Ella's heart began to pound. She had felt the connection growing between them, had caught herself thinking about Jesse at odd moments during the day, had started to look forward to their time together with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified her. But she hadn't dared to hope that he might feel the same way. / Jesse, I don't know if I'm ready for anything beyond friendship, / she said honestly. / there's so much damage, so much I'm still working through. / and I know, backslash Jesse said, and he reached over to take her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Backslash, and I'm not asking you to be ready now. I'm just telling you how I feel and letting you know that whenever you are ready, if you ever are, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, Ella. Backslash, and the sincerity in his voice, the patience and understanding made tears spring to Ella's eyes. Backslash, how are you so good, backslash, she asked. Backslash, how did I get so lucky as to stumble onto your path? Backslash, and backslash, I'm not that good. Backslash, Jesse said with a small laugh. Backslash, I've got my own ghosts, my own regrets. But maybe that's why I recognize the fight in you, the determination to be better than your worst moments. I see that fight because I've fought it myself. Backslash, and they sat together as the sun finished setting and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Ella rested her head on Jesse's shoulder, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than fear or numbness. She felt the tentative stirrings of happiness, fragile and new, but undeniably real. Backslash, and the peace was shattered 3 days later when Marcus Dalton rode into Tombstone asking questions about a dark-haired woman traveling alone. Word reached the ranch through one of the hands who had been in town buying supplies, and the moment Ella heard it, she felt her blood turn to ice. Backslash, I have to leave. Backslash, she told Jesse frantically, already throwing her few belongings into a bag. Backslash, I have to go right now before he finds this place. He'll kill you all, Jesse. He'll burn this ranch to the ground just to prove a point. Backslash, and Jesse caught her wrists gently but firmly, stopping her panicked movements. Backslash, running won't solve this, Ella. He'll just keep hunting you. But there might be another way. Backslash, and what way, backslash, Ella demanded, her voice rising. Backslash, there's no reasoning with Marcus. There's no law that can touch him. He's too smart, too careful, too vicious. Backslash, and the law might not be able to touch him, but that doesn't mean he's untouchable, backslash, Jesse said. Backslash, Tom knows the territorial marshal, a man named Cole Harrison. He's one of the few lawmen in these parts with a reputation for taking down men like Dalton. If we can get word to him about where Dalton is and what he's done, maybe we can end this once and for all. Backslash, and Ella shook her head violently. Backslash, you don't understand. I'd have to testify, have to tell everything I was forced to do. They'd arrest me too, Jesse. I'd hang right alongside him. Backslash, and no, backslash, Jesse said firmly. Backslash, you were a victim, a captive forced to help them. Any court would see that, especially with the right testimony. And I'd testify on your behalf. So would Tom and Mrs. Patterson. We wouldn't let you face that alone. Backslash, and the idea terrified her, but deep down, Ella knew Jesse was right. She couldn't run forever. Marcus would never stop looking for her, and even if he did eventually give up, she would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, never able to truly settle, never able to build that new life she had started to dream about. Backslash, what if it doesn't work? Backslash, she whispered. Backslash, what if they don't believe me? Backslash, and then we'll face that together too, backslash, Jesse said, pulling her into his arms. Backslash, but I have faith in you, Ella. You're stronger than you know, and the truth has a power all its own. Backslash, and Tom Patterson sent a rider to find Marshal Harrison that very day, and the lawman arrived at the ranch 2 days later. He was a tall, grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Ella told her story, interrupting only occasionally to ask clarifying questions. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and studied her for a long moment. Backslash, Miss Morrison, backslash, he said finally. Backslash, what was done to you was a crime, and from what you've told me, you were acting under duress the entire time. I don't see any prosecutor worth his salt trying to charge you with anything, but I won't lie to you. There will be questions, investigations, testimony required. It won't be easy. Backslash, backslash, and backslash, and backslash. Will it be enough to arrest Dalton? Backslash, Ella asked. That was all that mattered to her now, stopping him before he could hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her. Backslash, and Marshall Harrison nodded slowly. Backslash, your testimony, combined with the other evidence we've been gathering on the Dalton gang, should be enough to bring them in. The trick will be catching them. Dalton's smart and he's got good instincts for danger. But if he's in Tombstone looking for you, that gives us an opportunity. He's exposed, focused on finding you rather than watching his own back. Backslash, and a plan began to take shape. Ella would go into Tombstone, deliberately making herself visible so that word would reach Dalton. Marshall Harrison and his deputies would be positioned throughout the town, ready to move in when Dalton showed himself. It was dangerous, using Ella as bait, but it was also the surest way to draw Dalton out of hiding. Backslash, and Jesse hated the plan. Ella could see it in the tightness of his jaw and the worry in his eyes. But he also understood that it was necessary, that this was the only way to give Ella a real chance at freedom. Backslash, I'm coming with you, backslash, he insisted. Backslash, I won't be part of the Marshal's operation, but I'll be there, and if anything goes wrong, I'll get you out. Backslash, and Ella wanted to tell him no, wanted to keep him as far from danger as possible, but she also knew she needed his strength. Backslash, thank you, backslash, she said simply, taking his hand. Backslash, and they rode into Tombstone 2 days later, Ella's heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The town was busy, full of miners and cowboys and gamblers, all the rough characters that made Arizona Territory such a dangerous place. Marshall Harrison and his men were already in position, though Ella couldn't spot them. They had promised to stay out of sight until Dalton made his move. Backslash, and Ella and Jesse took a table outside one of the saloons, a position that gave them a view of the main street while also making Ella highly visible to anyone who might be watching. They ordered coffee and tried to look casual, though Ella's hands shook so badly she could barely hold her cup. Backslash, and it's going to be all right, backslash, Jesse murmured, covering her hand with his. Backslash, he shows up, the marshal moves in, and this nightmare ends. Backslash, and they didn't have to wait long. Ella spotted Marcus before he saw her, and the sight of him made her stomach turn. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and lean with cold blue eyes and a cruel smile. He was dressed like a prosperous rancher, nothing about his appearance suggesting the monster he truly was. He was walking down the street with 2 of his men, and Ella recognized both of them. Jake Coleman, Marcus's second-in-command, and Ray Tucker, the gang's tracker. Backslash, and then Marcus's gaze swept across the street and locked onto Ella. She saw the moment of recognition, saw his expression shift from casual alertness to predatory focus. He changed direction immediately, heading straight for the saloon, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. Backslash, and he's coming, backslash, Ella breathed, terror flooding through her. Jesse's hand tightened on hers. Backslash, and Marcus reached their table, his 2 men flanking him. Up close, Ella could see the anger in his eyes, the barely controlled rage that she knew from bitter experience could explode into violence at any moment. Backslash, well, backslash, he said, his voice deceptively pleasant. Backslash, if it isn't my dear Ella. You've led me on quite a chase, darling. I think it's time we went home, don't you? Backslash, and I'm not going anywhere with you, backslash, Ella said, proud that her voice came out steady despite her fear. Backslash, I'm done being your prisoner, Marcus. You have no power over me anymore. Backslash, and Marcus's smile turned ugly. Backslash, is that so? And I suppose this cowboy thinks he can protect you. Backslash, he looked at Jesse with open contempt. Do you have any idea what she is, boy, what she's done? She's a criminal, a thief, a liar. She's helped us rob and kill across 3 territories. The law wants her almost as much as they want me. That's a lie, Jesse said, rising from his chair. He was taller than Marcus, broader through the shoulders, and he positioned himself between Ella and the gang leader. She was your prisoner, forced to do things against her will. But that's over now. Marshal Harrison and half a dozen deputies have you surrounded, Dalton. You're not walking away from this. And for a moment, genuine surprise flashed across Marcus's face, then it hardened into something vicious. His hand moved toward his gun, but before he could draw it, Marshal Harrison's voice rang out across the street. Dalton, keep your hand away from that gun. You're under arrest, you and your men. And what happened next became a blur in Ella's memory. Marcus's men went for their guns, and suddenly bullets were flying. Jesse grabbed Ella and pulled her down behind the table as wood splintered around them. She heard shouting, the crack of gunfire, the screams of bystanders fleeing the violence. Jesse's body was wrapped around hers, protecting her, and she clung to him, praying that this would end, that they would survive. And the gunfight lasted less than a minute, though it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, Marcus and his men were on the ground. Ray Tucker was dead, Jake Coleman was wounded but alive, and Marcus was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Marshal Harrison and his deputies emerged from their positions, weapons drawn, and quickly secured the prisoners. It's over, Jesse said in Ella's ear. It's over, you're safe. And Ella couldn't quite believe it. She watched, feeling disconnected from her own body as the marshal's men hauled Marcus to his feet and clapped him in irons. Marcus's eyes found hers, and even wounded and captured, there was hatred in his gaze. You'll pay for this, he snarled. I'll see you hang. And the only one hanging is you, Dalton. Marshal Harrison said grimly. We've got enough evidence to convict you 10 times over, and that's before Miss Morrison's testimony. You're done. And the trial took place 6 weeks later in Tucson, the territorial capital. Ella testified for 2 days, telling the court everything about her captivity, about the crimes she had been forced to help commit, about Marcus's cruelty and control. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, standing up in front of a room full of strangers and laying bare the worst moments of her life. But Jesse was there every day, sitting in the front row, and whenever she felt her courage faltering, she would look at him and find the strength to continue. And the jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Marcus Dalton was sentenced to hang, and Jake Coleman received 20 years in prison. And as Marshal Harrison had predicted, no charges were brought against Ella. The judge made a point of stating for the record that she had been a victim, not a willing participant, and that her courage in coming forward had helped bring dangerous criminals to justice. When it was finally over, when she walked out of that courthouse a free woman, Ella broke down sobbing in Jesse's arms. 2 years of fear and pain and guilt came pouring out, and Jesse held her through all of it, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring reassurances and love. And yes, love. Somewhere during the long weeks of preparation for the trial, during the late-night conversations and the moments of doubt and fear, Ella had realized she was in love with Jesse Hartwell. She loved his strength and his kindness, his patience and his unwavering belief in her worth. She loved the way he made her laugh, the way he listened when she needed to talk, the way he had never once treated her as damaged or broken. And they were married 3 months later in a simple ceremony at the Triple Creek Ranch, with Tom and Mrs. Patterson serving as witnesses. Ella wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson had made for her, pale blue with white lace, and Jesse wore his Sunday best. As they spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, Ella felt truly free for the first time since her family's wagon had been attacked. And the years that followed were not always easy. Ella had nightmares sometimes, would wake up gasping and disoriented, reliving moments from her captivity. But Jesse was always there, pulling her close, reminding her that she was safe, that Marcus was dead and could never hurt her again. And gradually, the nightmares came less frequently, replaced by dreams of the future she and Jesse were building together. And they built a small house on land that Tom Patterson sold them at a generous price, a parcel on the eastern edge of the ranch with a view of the mountains. Jesse continued working as a cowboy, and Ella started a small business selling vegetables and preserves to the growing number of settlers moving into the territory. It was honest work, the kind that left her tired but satisfied at the end of each day. And 2 years after their marriage, Ella gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas Jesse Hartwell, after Tom Patterson and his father. Holding that tiny baby in her arms, seeing Jesse's face light up with joy and wonder, Ella felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. This was her family now, her new beginning built on the ruins of her past but not defined by it. And 3 years later, their daughter was born, a bright-eyed girl they named Sarah after Ella's mother. And then, 2 years after that, another son whom they named William. The house that had seemed so spacious when they built it suddenly felt full of noise and life and laughter, exactly as a home should be. And on quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Ella and Jesse would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, much as they had done on that ridge all those years ago. Sometimes they would talk about the ranch, about the children, about their plans for the future. Other times they would simply sit in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, content in each other's presence. And one such evening, when Ella was 35 years old and Jesse was 37, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about telling the children, he asked. About what happened before we met, about the Daltons and everything you went through. And Ella considered the question carefully. Thomas was 13 now, old enough to understand at least some of what she had endured. Sarah was 10 and William was 8. They were good children, happy and well-adjusted, growing up with a sense of security that Ella had once thought she would never experience again. Someday, she said slowly. When they're older, when they can understand not just what happened, but why it's important to be kind to people who are struggling. I want them to know that their mother survived something terrible and came out the other side. I want them to understand that our past doesn't have to define our future. And Jesse smiled and kissed her forehead. You're an amazing woman, Ella Hartwell. Do you know that? And Ella leaned into his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I'm a lucky woman, she corrected. Lucky that you found me by that creek, lucky that you saw something worth saving, lucky that you gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. I was the lucky one, Jesse insisted. You brought light into my life, Ella. You and our children, you're everything I never knew I needed. And they sat together as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, stars beginning to emerge one by one. In the distance, Ella could hear cattle lowing and the faint sound of someone playing a harmonica at the main ranch house. It was peaceful, ordinary, and absolutely perfect. And the years continued to pass, bringing changes as all years do. Tom Patterson eventually passed away at the age of 72, leaving the ranch to his son, who had returned from back east with his own family. Mrs. Patterson lived another 5 years, long enough to see all 3 of Ella's children grown. She died peacefully in her sleep, and Ella wept at her funeral, mourning the woman who had shown her kindness when she desperately needed it. And Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's green eyes and quick mind. He decided he wanted to become a lawyer, inspired by the stories he had eventually learned about how the law had protected his mother and brought her tormentors to justice. Jesse and Ella were immensely proud, though it meant sending him away to school in San Francisco. And Sarah inherited her mother's gift for growing things and developed a passion for botany, studying the native plants of Arizona territory and discovering new uses for them. She married a schoolteacher named Daniel, a kind man who reminded Ella of Jesse, and they settled in nearby Tucson. And William chose to follow in his father's footsteps, becoming a skilled horseman and rancher. He eventually took over management of the land that Jesse and Ella had built their lives on, expanding it into a modest but successful cattle operation. When Ella was 53 years old, Arizona achieved statehood. She and Jesse attended the celebration in Phoenix, marveling at how much the territory had changed since that day she had fled from the Dalton gang and stumbled onto Jesse's path. The Wild West was being tamed, though it would always retain some of its rough edges. Towns had schools and libraries now, churches and community centers. The rule of law, while not perfect, was stronger than it had been in those early days. And standing in the crowd, listening to the speeches about Arizona's bright future, Ella felt Jesse's arm slip around her waist. She looked up at him, at his face now weathered by decades of sun and wind, at the silver in his hair and the lines around his eyes, and felt a surge of love so strong it took her breath away. They had built this life together, had faced challenges and celebrated triumphs, had raised 3 amazing children and would soon have grandchildren of their own. What are you thinking? Jesse asked, noticing her intense gaze. I'm thinking about that day by Eagle Creek, Ella said softly. I'm thinking about the girl I was then, so broken and afraid, convinced that I was beyond redemption. And I'm thinking about the man who saw past all of that, who offered me kindness and patience and eventually love. I'm thinking about how you saved my life, Jesse. And Jesse shook his head, pulling her closer. We saved each other, he said. You gave me purpose, Ella. You gave me a reason to be the best man I could be. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment when I saw you by the creek and decided to stop. You ever wonder how different things would have been if you had just ridden past Ella asked. No, Jesse said firmly. Because I didn't ride past. I stopped, and you took a chance on trusting me, and we built this beautiful life together. That's not chance or luck or fate, that's choice. We chose each other, and we keep choosing each other every single day. And Ella stood on her toes to kiss him, not caring that they were in the middle of a crowded celebration. Let people see. Let them know that love could survive anything, could overcome any past, could build something lasting and true. They returned home to find a letter waiting for them from Thomas. He had passed the bar examination and been offered a position with a prestigious law firm in San Francisco. He wrote about his work, about the cases he was taking on, about his determination to help people who found themselves in impossible situations, just as his mother had once been helped. Reading his words, Ella felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of pride and joy. And Sarah visited regularly with her husband and their 2 children, Ella and Jesse's first grandchildren. Watching Sarah with her daughter, seeing the gentle patience and unconditional love, Ella understood that the cycle of trauma had been broken. Her children would never know the horrors she had experienced, would never have to fight their way out of darkness. They were free in a way she had never been at their age, and that freedom was the greatest gift she could have given them. And William eventually married as well to a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth, and they gave Ella and Jesse 3 more grandchildren to spoil and love. The house that had once been so quiet now rang with the laughter of children and the chatter of family gatherings. Ella cooked enormous meals, baked endless pies, and reveled in every moment of the chaos and joy. And on their 25th wedding anniversary, Jesse surprised her with a trip to California. They took the train, a marvel of modern technology that whisked them across the desert in comfort unimaginable during their younger days. They visited Thomas in San Francisco, toured the city, and spent a week on the coast, walking along beaches and watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. And one evening, sitting on the sand with the waves rolling in at their feet, Jesse pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a necklace with a simple gold pendant engraved with words that made Ella's breath catch. Your past doesn't define you. You said that to me once, Ella whispered, tears blurring her vision. That first day when I told you about the Daltons. And I've believed it every day since, Jessie said, fastening the necklace around her neck. You are not what was done to you, Ella. You are what you chose to become despite it. You are strength and courage and love. You are my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend and my greatest adventure. That's who you are, and that's who you've always been. And Ella kissed him there on the beach as the sun set and the stars began to appear, thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. From captivity to freedom, from fear to love, from brokenness to wholeness. It hadn't been easy, and there had been days when she thought she might not survive the weight of her memories. But she had survived, had thrived, had built a life richer than any dream she had dared to dream in those dark days with the Dalton gang. And they grew old together, as all couples hope to do. Their children brought them grandchildren, who in turn brought great-grandchildren. The land they had settled changed around them, becoming more civilized, more connected to the wider world. Automobiles replaced horses, electricity came to even remote ranches, and the wild west of their youth became the stuff of history books and legend. And Jesse passed away peacefully at the age of 79, surrounded by his family. Ella held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she also felt profound gratitude for the 52 years they had shared. He had been her savior, her partner, her love, and she knew that whatever came next, whether there was an afterlife or simply the peace of non-existence, he would always be with her. And Ella lived another 7 years, long enough to see Arizona celebrate its 20th year of statehood, long enough to hold her first great-great-grandchild. She spent her final years living with William and Elizabeth, helping in the garden and telling stories to the endless stream of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who came to visit. She told them about the old days, about what Arizona had been like when it was still a territory, about the challenges and dangers and excitement of frontier life. And sometimes with the older ones, the ones who could understand, she told them about the terrible things she had endured and how she had survived them. She told them about a cowboy named Jesse Hartwell, who had seen past her pain and fear to the woman she could become. Remember, she would tell them, her aged hand clasping theirs, that people are more than their worst moments. We all carry scars, visible and invisible, but those scars don't have to define us. We can choose to be kind, to be brave, to be loving. We can choose to build something beautiful from even the darkest materials. Backslash and Ella Morrison Hartwell died on a spring morning in 1939 at the age of 77. The sky was impossibly blue, and flowers were blooming in the garden she had tended for decades. She passed surrounded by family, their voices a gentle murmur of love and farewell. Her last conscious thought was of Jesse, of his steady blue eyes and his unwavering faith in her, and she smiled as she let go, knowing she was going home to him. And she was buried next to Jesse on a hillside overlooking the land they had built their lives on, with a view of the mountains in the distance. Her headstone bore her name, the dates of her birth and death, and below that, a simple inscription that captured the essence of her journey. She survived. She loved. She lived. And years later, Thomas, by then an elderly man himself, would write a book about his mother's life. It became a minor bestseller, a testament to one woman's courage and resilience, and to the transformative power of love. Readers across the country were moved by Ella's story, by her refusal to be defined by her trauma, by the beautiful life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. But for those who had known her, who had seen her tend her garden and bake her famous apple pies and hold her grandchildren with such tenderness, the most remarkable thing about Ella Hartwell wasn't what she had survived. It was the love she had given so freely, the wisdom she had shared so generously, and the example she had set of how to choose hope over despair, love over hate, and life over mere survival. And the little house on the edge of what had once been the Triple Creek Ranch still stands today, maintained by descendants who understand its significance. Inside, photographs line the walls, chronicling generations of a family built on love and second chances. Ella Morrison had been forced into terrible things, had endured horrors that would have broken many people. But she had also been given a precious gift in the form of a cowboy who understood that her past didn't define her. And with that understanding, with his love and support, she had defined herself, had chosen who she wanted to be and what kind of legacy she wanted to leave. She had been a survivor, yes, but more importantly, she had been a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a friend. She had been a woman who grew flowers and baked bread and told stories. She had been someone who understood suffering but chose to spread joy anyway. In the end, that was Ella's true victory over Marcus Dalton and the darkness he represented. He had tried to make her into something twisted and broken, had tried to define her through violence and fear. But she had refused that definition, had chosen instead to be defined by love and hope and the beautiful, ordinary moments of a life well lived. And in doing so, she had won more completely than any court verdict or prison sentence could have achieved. And her story became a legend in the family, passed down through generations as a reminder that people could change, could heal, could build something beautiful even from the most unpromising materials. And they would say, as Ella herself had said so many times, that we are not our tragedies. We are what we choose to become despite them. And so the story comes full circle, from a terrified young woman scrubbing blood from her hands in a creek, to an elderly woman surrounded by love, leaving behind a legacy far greater than she could have imagined. It's a story of survival and redemption, of love conquering fear, of hope outlasting despair. It's a story of the Wild West, yes, but more fundamentally, it's a story about the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of unconditional love. In that little cemetery on the hillside in Arizona, two headstones stand side by side, marking the resting place of Jesse and Ella Hartwell. And though the people who knew them in life are long gone now, their story lives on, a testament to the simple truth that changed Ella's life all those years ago. Your past doesn't define you. Only you get to decide who you are and what mark you leave on the world. Description: in 1882 Arizona Territory, a young woman fleeing a violent gang's captivity stumbles onto the path of Jesse Hartwell, a kind-hearted cowboy who offers her safety and understanding. Despite the terrible things she was forced to do during her captivity, he sees past her trauma to the woman she truly is, helping her reclaim her freedom and build a new life. /N/N as their bond deepens into love, they must confront her past one final time before they can build a future together. This sweeping tale follows their journey from survival to healing, and from fear to enduring love that spans generations. /N/N discover how love and courage can overcome even the darkest past in this heartfelt, Wild West romance.